Hi everyone, welcome back. I made a complete video on this and the battery went flat before it finished, and I decided to get rid of some of what's on there so it didn't look so, I've been talking about cluttered, and I'm going to just leave it as is and go through it. Maybe it'll be better in the long run, it's going to be a lot quicker. After we found the idea of what trig is, then I worked out how do you get a length of a side. I've only looked at one case of that, the seconds to come. Then this is what's good about this is I can do the angles as a whole group. Once you know what sine is, once you know what tan is, once you know what cos is, then you can do all three in one go. So let's have a look what's going on. On this triangle here, I've made it just any numbers. I tried to make it look reasonable. If that's a 10, that should be about an 8. I don't want it drawn to scale. When you walk into an assessment, it won't be drawn to scale. Hopefully it'll be reasonable. Sometimes as math teachers we do unreasonable things, but hopefully it'll be reasonable. And now I was talking about the angles now. We're looking for this angle. If that was 8 and that was 10, I could go and draw 8 and draw 10 and get out my protractor and actually measure it and find out what it is. What's really nice is it's stored, the calculations, if we get them in the right way, are stored on our calculator for us. I can go and draw one that's a 6 there and an 8 there. So this one used the hypotenuse, whereas this one didn't. Using the 6 there and an 8 there, then I could also measure the angle. So my little shortcuts are, this one didn't use the hypotenuse. When we don't use the hypotenuse, it's tan. The most common, if I look through 100 questions on trig and triangles, it'd be interesting if I actually did it right through thoroughly, but most of the time, a lot of the time I should say, it's tan. You get sine, you do get cos, and they're both legitimate, but it's more commonly tan. So when these two meet in an angle, in the right angle, then it's going to be a tan question. So if it doesn't say hypotenuse and you really don't like this topic and you still struggle with it, you can just go to tan and put the numbers in. Let's go back to this one here. I talked about this is mini-me. I'm looking across, just like I've said a heap of times, I'm looking across the people opposite me from where my house is. So it's like there's mini-me and I'm looking across there, and that's called the opposite. So if I wanted to, instead of writing opposite, I prefer just to put a capital O. So on this one, there's the opposite. There's mini-me again. I'm looking across to the opposite. And on this one, there's mini-me again, and I'm looking across to the opposite, and there's nothing there. So I'm not going to draw the arrow across there. Go to this one. It's got a big H on it. Why? Because the longer side, the one that's opposite the right angle, the one that just simply goes the furthest is a hypotenuse. So that's got a hypotenuse. This doesn't have a hypotenuse. This one does have a hypotenuse. You can clearly see that's the longest of the three sides. If you weren't sure, you can hold your hand out and have a look, and you can see that that's the longest side. So this side uses a H and an O. So we have three choices: sine, cos and tan. So there's the H and the O. So this question has to use the sine button. Why? Because the numbers for this question are stored in the calculator under the sine button. This one is using an O and a, well, then we'd have to figure out what that one was. I already made a point, it was tan. But if it's not the hypotenuse and it's next to the angle, that's the adjacent, so that's going to be an A. So we've got an O and an A, so go up to these, that doesn't say O and A, that doesn't say O and A, that does say O and A. I do like the tick method though, O and H. So tick the O's, there's an O, there's an O. Tick the A's, there's the A and the A. So just in case you haven't seen my other videos, the tick method works really good. That's got the most number of ticks, so we're going to use the tan. So if a student really struggles with it, the tick method is wonderful. Tan theta, and then you write that the first one is the numerator, the top, and the second one is the denominator, the bottom. So these two become a fraction, and there's the fraction there. So there's your TOA, TOA. So then cross to the next one, cos theta. Now we know this one again, it's not the hypotenuse, but it's next to the angle, so that's also called the adjacent. So we could use the tick method for that one, and we get an A and a H. Then we can put the right numbers in. So let's shortcut it so this doesn't drag out. There's the 8 and the 10. There's the 6 and the 8, the 6 and the 8. There's the 14 and the 20, the 14 and the 20. And why I like this approach to teaching it all is it means that, I've lost my calculator, there it is. This approach to it means that we're looking at one type of solving. Instead of learning 3 types of solving, you get a chance for each method to sink in. So this method is, now there's 2 problems, there's 2 ways of doing this. I still prefer teaching this way, there's various reasons for it. So if I want to get the angle, I know it's still going to be the sign button. So on your calculator, we've got the sign button, but on the sign button, we also have the little yellow, in this case yellow, some people say gold writing, and then it has this yellow, the yellow or the gold relates to it. This calculator says second function, some calculators say shift. So if we want to get the angle, the gold writing or the yellow writing is finding the angle. So you could say that that's the find the angle. The good part is this is find the fraction, whereas that one over there is, or the decimal, whereas the top one is find the angle. So I want to find the angle for this question, so I'm going to go second function sine. Some calculators have shift sign, some have a different yellow or more of a goldy yellow. So the buttons that I'm going to press are shift sine, so that tells it to get the angle, and then I'm going to type in the fraction. Now if I type in the fraction, I just type 8, the calculator thinks that the question says this. It thinks that you're saying find the angle for 8. And by the way, any number that's bigger than 1, you can't find the angle for a sine or a cosine. You can for a tan, but you can't find for a sine or a cos. So the moment the calculator sees that 8 there, it says you've got an error. In other words, it can't calculate the answer. So you've got to tell the calculator using a fraction. You can use, if you want to look at it later, most calculators have a button like that, which we call the fraction button. Whereas I prefer to say to people, go bracket, so you're telling the calculator you're going to type a fraction, then you can go divide by 10, close the bracket and press equals. So I'm going to do the steps. I've told it shift sign, I've got to now say I've got a bracket, and I'm going to go 8 divided by 10, close the bracket. So this is really all about order of operations. And I've got my angle of 53.1 degrees. So the angle is 53.1 degrees. And really, 0.1 of a degree, if you can think of how small a degree is, it's so small. You got to fit 90 into a right angle. It's almost like most people would just go 53 degrees. And you even don't have to even say to the nearest degree. Depends on the question. Watch out, if your question says 1 decimal place, you need to go more accurate. Same for this one. I'm not going to write up the steps this time. How can I get the angle? I know I'm going to have to use the tan button. I sometimes call it the backward tan button, but I think it's easy enough just to go, here we go. We want backward tan. I just said it automatically. So second function tan. So I'm looking for the gold writing or the yellow writing, so I told it that I'm using the yellow. Now, I want to tell the calculator I'm not just using a 6, I'm using a 6 divided by 8. I don't want to convert that to a decimal. I just want to do what the calculation says. So I go bracket, and then I go 6 divided by an 8. Remember, a fraction bar just means divide. So divided by 8, close the bracket, press equals, and I get my answer of 36.86, which is very, very close to 37 degrees. One more to go. You can probably even switch the video off now. Want to find the angle for the cos. So I know I've got to use the cos button, but if I press the cos button, that goes all wrong because I'm looking for the angle. So second function, press the cos button. Now I go, what do I got to do? Tell the calculator I'm not using 14. So it'll interpret what you're saying on what's called order of operations. So I've got to say, open the bracket to say I'm typing 14 divided by 20. Close the bracket, press equals, and this time I've got an angle of 45.57, so it's closer to 46 degrees than it is to 45 degrees. So I could draw that up and figure out and measure the angle. I could draw that up and measure the angle, draw that up, measure the angle. The wonderful thing is we don't have to, and it's all stored on here. And the good part is if you get used to this, make this your best friend, then you can do it so much quicker. I feel like maybe for the first time here, I should look at this question alone, get rid of these others for a second, a few seconds. If you want to turn it off, of course that's your prerogative, just turn it off. I want to show you how quickly I could do this question. I'm not going to write the rule down. It goes to the right angle. It doesn't have the hypotenuse, so I'm just going to go 10 theta, and I'm going to write down that it's a 6 on 8. But all I did, write down what that was. Be careful, please at least write one thing down. I can talk about marking methods. But if you make a mistake, if your calculator set on the wrong setting, if it thinks you're in France and you do grads, Just want to talk about grads for a moment. In the right angle we have 90 degrees. The French have 100 grads. So they split it into 100 instead of split on 90. So if you imagine calculating this and it thinks that you're in France, it's a different calculation. Well, actually it does the same system, but it converts it, instead of degrees, it converts it to grads. Let's have a look at it. So all I did was, there's no hypotenuse, I know it's a tan, got to get these correct, and you've got to remember across, mini-me looking across is a 6 on an 8, and then you get an angle, you remember to go shift, tan for an angle, and you've got to say I'm typing in a fraction. How do you say I'm typing in a fraction? You can either use the fraction button, or you can go bracket 6 divided by 8, close the bracket, press equals, and there's our answer of 36.8987. So that's about 37 degrees. And I think that's better than the original video, and I hope you appreciate it. Thank you.